Hello everyone, my name is Rafa and I'm the one who's been behind all of this GEX stuff for Sear Chart. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I started trading about 10 years ago. Maybe around 4 or 5 years ago, I bumped into GEX primarily thanks to Spot Gamma and Brent over there, which, him and his team have been a big pioneer of all this GEX stuff, especially lately since, at least in the last few years since 0DTE came about. I love their option tools. I've used others as well, other GEX tools as well. But one thing that was always sort of missing for me was that I didn't have enough control over the data, and it always felt like a bit of a like I wanted more out of it. And because I didn't have the data, I couldn't do it. I was constrained by their offering of the tool and the data. So I essentially decided with some input from one of the guys in the chat room to build my own. I started this process late last year, and I think I released the initial version around December. And we've had a growing community ever since of people who like options and GEX. There's a lot of people who don't know anything about it, so I also need to create some educational material for them. But essentially, this is kind of like the start of it. Over the last few weeks, we've had a lot of people join Discord, and there's really no education about what all this information means. So I figured, since over the last day we had a lot of people join Discord, I would make at least a video to show you how I use the tools that I built and how they work, what they mean, what you'll be looking at, because essentially this screen right here, this window, is the one that I'll be screen sharing live every day. And for those that don't have Sear Chart, or haven't asked me for access to my study, which I'm happy to give you, just give me your Sear Chart username, and then you can have it on your own chart. This is what you'll be seeing. And so let's essentially dive into the different pieces of it that you're seeing. There's 4 different pieces of data that you'll be seeing here. One, which are these horizontal lines. These are levels. Then the coloring of the bars. This is based on the data from this total GEX value. And then you have the subgraph for DEX, which is essentially just based on delta, and GEX, which is based on gamma. Needless to say, all of this data is based on options flow. So I have a server which is receiving all option trades, quotes from Opera. And so it's getting the data as fast as it's hitting the market, so as fast as these trades are being executed. My server receives the data, does the processing that it needs to, and then sends it out to all of the different clients in Sear Chart that are using this. Okay, right now we're looking at a 1-minute chart, but typically what we'll be doing is I'll have this in a 5-second chart, and I'll explain why. Primarily, it's to be able to see the different momentum pickup for these subgraphs, because otherwise it's good to see it at a high level, like at a 1 minute, but it's a lot better to see it in like the 5 seconds interval. We won't get it any faster than that. Right now, the server essentially computes the data every 5 seconds. I may increase that or reduce that, in the future, but for now it's just every 5 seconds. Okay, so you got the 4 pieces of data. I'll start with these 2 down here, which are what I built initially. GEX down here, from the bottom up. GEX down here is why I built all of this. This is where it all started, and GEX essentially computes the gamma exposure that market makers have based on all the options that have been traded, right? So most of the times whenever we trade options, or any customer trades options, the person on the other side of that trade, who's either selling or buying the option that the customer is trading, is the market maker. So therefore they have market exposure, and they have to hedge appropriately. And then they typically use ES futures to hedge for SPX options, because all this data is based on SPX data. I'll explain more what GEX is exactly, because there's a lot of people who are not familiar with what GEX is, and I'm working on a presentation for that, but it's not quite ready yet. But I think maybe in the next few days to a week, I'll have more information, because I think understanding what this all means and how it comes about gives you the confidence to follow the data and follow the signals that it gives us. Okay, so let's just focus on this subgraph down here. The blue line is measuring the gamma exposure for calls, the red is for puts, and then the gray line is the total, or the difference between calls and puts. So it's essentially doing what's the value for calls at this data point minus the data for puts at this data point, and then it plots it. And the resulting value is what it plots, right? So there's times where calls start moving, puts start decreasing, and therefore total GEX will start trending up. The values that we had yesterday were pretty relaxed for the most part of the day. I'd say like anything between positive 10, negative 10. These are numbers in the billions, so these are billions in gamma exposure that market makers have. And then eventually later in the day we pushed a little bit further down. These are not any crazy numbers really, seen a lot higher in the past. So there's a few things here. Whenever we're above this, whenever total GEX is above the zero line, it means that we're in positive gamma territory. One thing I forgot to mention is that all of this data is based on 0 DTE. This is why towards the end of the day, you'll start just noticing these lines will start just flattening out more and more. If we have a huge ramp at the end of the day, of course, you're going to see a big ramp up. But for the most part, on most days, if I go to another day here, for example, well, that also didn't prove my point. But often what we'll see is these lines around 2 to 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time will just start slowly trending towards zero. Okay, so that is GEX. I'll go over some different trade setups later in the video, just so that you can look out for these things. But I just want to explain the different concepts first. So that's GEX. It measures gamma. DEX over here, which is this other subgraph, measures delta. So this is the other Greek. Sometimes what we'll notice is that delta will start leading gamma. There's a lot of factors that play into this. It's really hard to know with the data that I'm exposing right now as to why delta is leading gamma, for example, such as here where puts started to increase, and then puts were, we were in a negative DEX environment, and then later we switched over to a positive one. Typically you want to have the confluence between the two to make a trade decision, but sometimes when DEX starts leading, you can take a little short scalp, or you can know that potentially, GEX will continue to lead, and maybe you don't get super bullish in the zone. You have to be observing this very closely throughout the day to be able to make some money. Okay, and then the third thing, which is based on the options flow, are these levels. These levels basically, let me bring up the subgraphs up here. So these levels are explained here, what they mean. You'll see them up here on this bar. So CHV means call highest volume. This means out of all of the data, all of the option strikes for calls, there's a certain strike that will have the highest volume. Same thing for trades, same thing for calls bought, calls sold, and then highest open interest and lowest open interest. So that means that the highest OI, which is bought minus sold, and then conversely lowest OI, which is bought minus sold, but the lowest one, which will be the most negative, means that strike was the most sold for that 0 DT option chain. Okay, and you can see these will fluctuate throughout the day, and that's pretty normal. But the way that I think about it is that this is a zone, and then down here this is a zone. Sometimes, well, not sometimes. Basically, every beginning of the day, you'll notice as positions are being put on, because my data only starts at the market open. I don't take into consideration anything that happened before the market open. Sorry. So this is why you'll see a lot of fluctuation here. You can see it up here as well, and then you'll have some strikes which are essentially the ones that are the most popular for the different metrics, and for the most part they will cluster. So you see all the put ones are clustered here. All the call ones are not clustered the same as puts, but they're in the same zone. Typically they'll be like five points away, because there'll be one SPX strike away. What I have here is the SPX strikes mapped onto ES. If you have SPX data or SPY data, you can come in here and you can tell it, hey, I want to show it on SPX, and then this is, if you wanted to show it on SPY, you may do like minus, or actually we have to divide it. Maybe I did this wrong. So maybe you can't do it for SPY yet, but anyway, that's that's what we're looking at right now. Let me take a sip of water. Okay, and then finally, the colored bars, and then I'll get into the different entry setups. So the colored bars are based on this GTS, graph trend strength. Let me show this study. This is best viewed in a 5-second chart, because that's what I built it for. Okay, I'll just take a couple examples here, but GTS is the only thing here that's based on math. Well, the divergence arrows too. Sorry, not the divergence, but there's some dots somewhere in here sometimes, like this one right here. These are based on divergences between total GEX and price. I won't get into this in this video, but the colored bars as well as the arrows are based on GTS. GTS is based on math, and GTS looks at total GEX line and price. So what GTS is trying to do is tell you when there's a trend that is beginning. Often we'll see one at the very beginning of the day. I tend to just ignore these. In this case, maybe you could have argued that it worked out, but let's ignore that one because the data goes from 0 to a value. So often you'll see, okay, now we're in trend because we were at 0 before, but that's inaccurate. So what I try to do is I wait for that to reset. We saw a little short trend starting, but nothing came out of it, and then we started seeing a little ramp up from, you can see this on total GEX, starting to move higher and higher. And if you wanted a safer trade rather than getting in somewhere down here, you may want to buy here, essentially. GTS tells you, hey, the trend is starting. That's when it's starting to cross 1.5. The trend is starting. And then at some point, once it crosses, I think 2.7, I believe that's what I got configured, but you can come in here and play with it yourself. This is just all math related. So yeah, once the early trend is 1.5, confirmed trend is 2.7, and then that would be your entry. You enter, you have to figure out where you're going to put your stop loss. Maybe down here, I don't know. And then you sort of write it out. Same thing here, the trend ended. Sometimes they'll go against you a lot more before the trend actually ends. So I would say observe it, know that it's based on math. It's going to be a lagging indicator, so use it as you wish. I kind of have it on the screen because it's nice to actually get that confirmation. I'll often get into a trade way before, and then I'll wait for GTS to print, and I'll already be seeing this with my eyes, right? And it's obvious to me because I've been looking at this data for so long. You can see this here at the end of the day too, and at least it keeps you on the right side of the trade. You're not, if this thing is printing blue, avoid shorting as much as possible because you're likely on the wrong side of the trade. Sometimes you're not. Let's go look at some other examples from maybe previous days where that wasn't the case. Like for example, right here, we got a few trend signals that were starting and then they just failed. The nice thing is that it fails pretty quickly for the most part. Sometimes it doesn't. Like for example, right here, trend starts, took a lot of heat, and then you got the short. Here you made some money maybe at the very beginning, but then if you kept holding on, you would have lost some money. So it's left at the trader's discretion here. I hide GTS just because I just want to see more of the lines themselves. But yeah, that is that's what we're looking at. Hopefully this gives you an idea of today when the market's open, what you're looking at, and the way that the levels have worked for us in the Discord room in the past is that when price goes up to a level, there's often rejection. If it trades above the level, well, in this case, it was a little tricky because we had a zone. But it's really hard for price to maintain itself above or below these levels. So there are often really good signals to go short or to go long. Yesterday, we had a really nice one, and then it immediately worked out. It doesn't always work that way. You can see it here, the rejection also worked really nice. You want to ignore these at the very beginning of the day because they're just positions getting set up. Let's take a look at another day. See it right there. Here, these blips I tend to ignore. It means they're toggling between two different strikes, right? You can see it's toggles up, toggles down, toggles up, toggles down. So I try not to put a lot of weight into them unless this one would have stuck here for a while, but it's such a tight range here. And you'll notice very often, I'll switch over to the 1 minute chart. Very often, it didn't happen yesterday, but very often we'll close inside of that range. See it right here. I think here we had news. I mean, often, with news, most systems are going to have a hard time working. It provided some resistance right here, but eventually we started trading higher and higher. Here we traded above it, came back below. We had noticed this in the chat room, which was pretty nice. And then calls moved up, provided resistance again, and then we ended up closing inside of the range. You'll notice too that things will start converging really tight towards the end of the day, and then usually price will close right in between. Here, the range got pretty tight, and we basically closed right on the call side. Closed in between. You can see multiple rejections there from both sides, down here as well. But okay, that is, I don't want to make this video super long, but I really wanted to explain exactly what everything is, because I know not only have people joined a lot recently, but I've been getting a lot of questions too about how things work. I want to go over 2 trade setups that were really nice in the past week. Let me see if I can remember the second one. One of them happened yesterday, of course, with this long right here. I traded this one, got pretty heavy long, made some good money. After looking at these levels for a while, you have to trust them. You can get some confirmation with order flow. So I think on Friday last week, which was here, I think I bought this low, and there was no level here, but if I go to the 5-second chart, I think maybe the low was right here. Let's look. So it was at 12:30. Yes, so it was this low right here. Multiple things happened here, which was pretty nice. Let me go. This is my multiple accounts, but typically when I trade in Sierra chart, I'll be trading in this chart, which is a 1,000 trade chart. So let me go here. And 12:30 was right here. So this was the low of the day on Friday. So we had multiple things occur as we were trading down here, and we made a new low. A buyer stepped in really aggressively, just with a market order. This right here is my reconstructed tape study. The reconstructed tape gives me a better view of what the true market order size was, because what the market actually reports to us is what fills occurred based on the market orders that hit the market, right? So if a market order of 100 lots, say a 100 lot order, buy order, hits the market, what you're going to see reported in time and sales is going to be all the individual limit orders that market order filled. So if there's 100 limit orders, you're going to see 100 new rows on your time and sales. If there's 10 orders of 10 lots each, you're going to see 10 time and sales records, right? And what this study tries to do, it reconciles all of that into a single order so that you can see the size relative to everything else, and you can see how big it was. So as we were coming down, we saw this. Well, I saw this. This order hit right here, which is typically just a fantastic sign. It doesn't always work out. And then I think I waited for call GEX to start moving, and I know this requires a little bit of practice, but I've been looking at this for quite a long time. You can see puts are pretty flat throughout here. I'll actually go like this. Even previously, puts were, even though they were moving up, it was just a slow little trend, right? And calls were more, active. As we hit that low right here, what I wanted to see was that quick separation and momentum between calls and puts. So if I go right here, you can see that compression, and then you start seeing that separation. What I want to see is that continuous separation of both lines, and for total GEX to also confirm that. As we started going, I also started seeing more buy orders hit the tape. And at some point, somewhere in here, I decided to go long. You can see that here as well with DEX. Really nice and clear, actually. And you can see the relative speed of this movement compared to everything previously. And that was the low of the day. I mean, we just never, let me zoom out a little bit. We just never looked back. You can see another separation here. It's another trade setup. You have to be observing this one. I almost think about these like, I don't know, like alligator jaws that are opening. And then you can see GTS gives you the later signal. It was a really nice trade. I should be told I didn't hold on to it this long. I'm more of a scalper myself. I like to have a little risk as possible, for as long as possible, for as little time as possible. But that's something I'm constantly working on, to be able to hold on to my trades for longer. So yeah, that was the second setup that I wanted to show. You'll see that momentum many times. There was another setup some other time last week, but I just don't remember when it was. But it was really clear when you see just call GEX ramp, and it gives you really good confidence that you probably caught the low of the day. But yeah, that is all that I have for now. In the future, some of the things that I'll just cover this. Some of the things that I want to be building is I want to add more expiration chains precisely to avoid this. Like the last 2 hours of the day are really hard for me to trust this data, just because you start seeing these lines flatten out, because they're essentially all converging towards zero. Because at the end of the day, everything's going to be zero because all of these option strikes expire. And the data that we see is like one print before the end of the day. This is why sometimes they won't be at zero, especially when they ramp. But if we had another print, everything will just collapse to zero. So I want to add more option chains, at least like 2, 3, 4 days out, so that we can see what traders are doing for tomorrow or 2 days from now. So that's going to come, and that's going to give us a slightly different picture. And I also want to add more tickers, such as mag7 and SPY, and maybe put all of that data together into a single value, so that maybe we'll get better signals. All of this is still TBD, but so far everything that I built has been incremental and additive. So I want to make sure that whenever I bring something new, it actually adds value. It's not just another tool that maybe it works sometimes, because I want to be using this for trading, and I don't want to be looking at things that are not working the majority of the time. All right, and also one other thing is I want to keep things simple, which I think that's something that I've tried to do from the very beginning. I think one thing that has made it a little bit more complex has been like the coloring of the lines. I think that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, because it's based on math, right? So something I may remove in the future, but in general, my approach is keep it simple, stupid, even though you add new features. So anyway, that's the plan. Hope this video made sense to y'all. Hope it wasn't super long. And let me know if you have any questions or feedback. It's always welcome. Please ask questions in Discord. People are super helpful, and the plan is just to build a really great community of traders who are helping each other. That's all, guys. Thanks.